What is the purpose of the self parameter? Why is it needed? Consider this example. I know that self refers to the specific instance of my class. But why must func explicitly include self as a parameter? Why do we need to use self in the method's code? Some other languages make this implicit, or use special syntax instead. For a language-agnostic consideration of the design decision, see what is the advantage of having this /self pointer mandatory explicit? To close debugging questions where op omitted a self parameter for a method and got a type error, use type error. Method takes one positional argument but two were given instead. If op omitted self dot in the body of the method and got a name error, consider how can I call a function within a class?
The reason you need to use self dot is because Python does not use special syntax to refer to instance attributes. Python decided to do methods in a way that makes the instance to which the method belongs be passed automatically, but not received automatically. The first parameter of methods is the instance the method is called on. That makes methods entirely the same as functions, and leaves the actual name to use up to you. Although self is the convention, and people will generally frown at you when you use something else, self is not special to the code, it's just another object. Python could have done something else to distinguish normal names from attributes, special syntax like Ruby has, or requiring declarations like C++ and Java do, or perhaps something yet more different, but it didn't. Python's all for making things explicit, making it obvious what's what, and although it doesn't do it entirely everywhere, it does do it for instance attributes. That's why assigning to an instance attribute needs to know what instance to assign to, and that's why it needs self dot.
Let's say you have a class classer which contains a methoder defined as, and objector is an instance of this class. Now when objector.methoder arg1, arg2, is called, Python internally converts it for you as. The self variable refers to the object itself. Let's take a simple vector class. We want to have a method which calculates the length. What would it look like if we wanted to define it inside the class? What should it look like when we were to define it as a global method/function? So the whole structure stays the same. How can we make use of this? If we assume for a moment that we hadn't written a length method for our vector class, we could do this. This works because the first parameter of length_global can be reused as the self parameter in length_new. This would not be possible without an explicit self. Another way of understanding the need for the explicit self is to see where Python adds some syntactical sugar. When you keep in mind that basically, a call like is internally transformed to, it is easy to see where the self fits in. You don't actually write instance methods in Python. What you write is class methods which must take an instance as a first parameter. And therefore, you'll have to place the instance parameter somewhere explicitly.
When objects are instantiated, the object itself is passed into the self parameter. Because of this, the object's data is bound to the object. Below is an example of how one might like to visualize what each object's data might look. Notice how self is replaced with the object's name. I'm not saying this example diagram below is wholly accurate, but it will hopefully help one visualize the use of self. The object is passed into the self parameter so that the object can keep hold of its own data. Although this may not be wholly accurate, think of the process of instantiating, creating and assigning internal values. An object like this, when an object is made, the object uses the class as a template for the object's own data and methods. Without passing the object's own variable name into the self parameter, the attributes and methods in the class would remain a general template and would not be referenced to, belong to, the object. So, By passing the object's name into the self parameter, it means that if 100 objects are instantiated from the one class, each of the 100 objects can keep track of each object's own data and methods. Summary: classes are general, not ultra-specific, templates that a newly created object can pass its own specific data into, without necessarily affecting the rest of the objects that could be created from the same class, allowing for less copy-pasted code that serves the purpose of creating many objects that have the same patterns. Self is for specifying that a specific object's data should be used instead of some other data. See the illustration below.
I like this example.